Almost. Now we're ready? All right. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Seldovia City Council on Monday, January 2nd. Time is 4:02 p.m. and this is a work session. And our discussion topic for this afternoon will be the draft personnel policy. And we had seen this rolling in with a shovel and hockey stick. And this is, I think, the second time that we've taken a look at this. And we'll go ahead and let the manager or the clerk give us an update, and then we'll get back into it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I do have changes noted from the last meeting. I haven't made any of those changes yet. We only made it through to sick leave in our last discussion, which is 404. So I can go ahead and screen share if you'd like, and then we can just continue on the conversation. I was hoping we can get through the end of the from where we are through the end of the personnel policy, talk about some of those bigger ticket items that do impact the budget that we discussed last time, like cashing out PTO leave, bereavement leave, volunteer time. City closures is not necessarily a budget item, but certainly one to pay attention to. And then a couple of things that have come up since. So with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. And please stop me if you guys have questions along the way, or if you want me to go back to anything. Okay. Okay, so you see that there. And I'm not sure, I made a note that we left off at sick leave, so I don't know if that meant we actually covered sick leave or not. So I figured to start out fresh because I have notes for vacation leave. I think that's something that we talked about. Is that that payout, the cash out, if that's something that council wants to leave in there. And with that, moving on to sick leave, this is something that we just recently started offering. I think council approved it in the last year to offer a sick leave, which is a 40-hour or 1 week, equal to 1 week compensation for eligible employees. So that'd be your full-time regular employees for items such as personal injury, illness, temporary disability, personal, medical, and dental appointments, or illness or injury of a spouse, dependent, or the need to accompany a spouse or dependent to a medical appointment. Sick leave cannot be used for any absence where the employee is receiving compensation benefits under the Alaska Workers' Compensation Act. We did just recently have this come up, and it kind of ties in with the bereavement leave. We had an employee who had a loss in their family of somebody that was not a spouse or an immediate dependent, but somebody who, according to the Alaska statutes, is an immediate family member. And I don't know if you guys remember what immediate family members are, but that's back towards the beginning of the packet, and it's actually rather extensive. You know, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, uncle, aunt, mother-in-law, father-in-law, mother, father, are all considered immediate family members. So I did have an employee bring this up and address that we have leave and other policies that directly lead back to Alaska statute of the immediate family. Should this sick leave remain where it's more defined than Alaska statute to just, and maybe that's something we need to actually even look into, is we can further define what that means for an individual who can use that leave, or if we should broaden that back up to the immediate family definition that we utilize for other items in our personnel policy. So I don't know if you guys have anything immediate off of that to think, or if you want to think that through, but that did just recently come up.
Okay, so right now, it's yeah, I can see the wording here, but right now it references back, or does not reference back to or match up with the Alaska statute, or what exactly are we?
Yeah,
Okay.
it wouldn't match up with the Alaska statute. It more narrowly defines sick leave being used for an absence due to personal injury, illness, or temporary disability, personal medical and dental appointments, or illness or injury of a spouse or a dependent, or the need to accompany a spouse or a dependent to a medical appointment. The question was, and if there was a bereavement leave, maybe that would cover it. There was a loss in the family. It was an immediate family member.
Right.
Could sick leave be used instead of PTO? So maybe having bereavement leave would cover that. But I could see where if you had a sick aunt or mother-in-law or, mom, and you needed to take care of them, could you utilize sick leave for that? That's the question.
Any thoughts, comments on that?
So does Alaska statute allow for that, or?
It doesn't specifically
doesn't
address
specifically,
sick
okay.
leave. It just addresses what immediate family is.
Okay. I feel like in our circumstance, that would be fine to have it extend that way, just because the statute, if it reads that those are immediate family members, then that keeps it clear, I feel like, for the sick leave. And then it's up to the person to decide, do they save that in case something else, just like you do with PTO, like, yeah, it just gives a little more option. And I think since we've been through things like COVID and that, where you realize sometimes, an illness can affect the family in that way of needing somebody to care, they might be somebody who can, well, so.
And I should point out that the sick leave is limited. It's that 40-hour or 1 week's worth of compensation per year. So yeah, there's no
Yeah.
building it. Once once the year passes, every January 1, it starts over. So if you have leave left, it's gone. And it starts over. But it is in the event of an emergency.
Is there some way we'd want to tie that back? I mean, I don't want to overthink this at all, but
Mhm.
certainly in the loss of some, tragic loss, that you
Mhm.
tie it back to the assuming you're going to use your bereavement leave first. Right. And then if it's, because if you're traveling back east or something and you're going to lose a couple days travel right there, maybe there's just I don't have a problem using if a person needs to use the sick leave in conjunction with that.
Yeah.
But I would think that you'd use the bereavement leave first. And then if you're just, maybe you're out of PTO, I don't know.
Yeah,
And then maybe you can use the sick leave in conjunction with that.
I like that because I've seen that in a lot of policies when there is a choice of things, but you have to use X before Y. And I think that's smart. So that way we don't have people using the sick leave first and then they become sick and need that. It's
It's probably rare that this would ever come up
Yeah.
within our small staff, but it's certainly a possibility. So. Yeah, and it's nothing worse than, being out of PTO and having to, be on LWOP or something is certainly, especially if there's a tragedy in your family. So.
Heidi, may I comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
So is in that circumstance where if it's pretty important that the employee leaves, could they, and they didn't have enough sick leave, could they buy someone else's if somebody else wanted to give them their sick time?
No.
No. Okay.
That is a good question, though, kind of a follow on to that. Do we have anywhere in here where you can donate, not buy, but can an employee donate either PTO or any kind of leave?
Not at this time, but we
Okay.
could look into that. If
That's
something-
usually done with vacation, not sick leave.
Is that something that council would like us to implement?
It's just a thought. I mean, so right now you can't, there's no provision to donate PTO then either.
Mhm.
Okay. We have that at our work.
PTO,
I mean,
you can.
yeah. PTO is certainly a nice option it's just like crowdsourcing or crowdfunding, right? If someone's jammed up and they are absolutely out of PTO or max, they've used everything. And then if sometimes we'll come across that for people that have had an illness or something and they're just out of leave, right?
Mhm.
And where everyone will come in and donate a day or two or whatever, and then they end up with another week or 2 weeks of paid versus non-paid time. So
We can incorporate that in, Mr. Mayor.
I mean, you guys have any, let's see, I see Jen, you got your hand up?
Yeah, just, I mean, I'm not against the idea, but how does that work when on your books, if say a higher paid employee is donating their time because it's accrued at their pay rate or, and then they're giving it to somebody at a different pay rate, is that gonna mess? I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but you see what I'm saying? It's gonna come out in the end at a different number.
Yeah, the accrual rate is going to be a little bit different, right? So yeah, you'd have to work some backwards math there to get that figured out.
And I have seen provisions for that in other people's policies. We would just have to look at what that would look like for ours.
Okay, yeah, yeah, I can see how it would be weird on paper, but I like the idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you guys run that to ground, you could probably figure that out.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts in John or Ashley on that? Okay.
Okay. Then we do run into leave without pay. This is pretty standard and something that is new in our policy, but it's been it's an internal policy about leave without pay. Just must be authorized by the city manager, applicable law, failure to return to work following authorized leave without pay is considered resignation. Most common is health or emergency. We're permitted to reduce the salary of exempt employees, which at this point in time, the city manager is the only exempt employee. When the city directs an employee to leave work, the requirement that the employee exhaust their accrued leave will not apply. So if they're on administrative leave without pay, then they do not have to exhaust their accrued leave for that. The employee will generally have the option to save their accrued leave and take an unpaid absence. For example, an employee is not required to exhaust all paid leave when placed on disciplinary suspension, furloughed, or placed on administrative leave or other suspension. This is subpoenaed in a case not involving the city or authorized to take bereavement leave. The employee may have the option of using paid leave for a furlough unless the city orders otherwise. It should not extend 10 working days per year. Vacation and PTO leave will not accrue during the term of a leave without pay. And if the city may benefit from or not be harmed by the absence, the city manager may approve more than 10 working days under the following conditions. One being FMLA or training or education, being the first one listed there, or serious health. So fairly standard, unless you guys have anything to add to that.
Questions, comments from anyone on that? Nope, I think we're good.
Okay. I'll just quickly move through Family Medical Leave Act. I would like to make a point that while the city is covered by FMLA, so that's why it's included, although we have no eligible employees until we have over 50 employees, certain aspects of FMLA still apply even without eligible employees. So we don't meet the threshold of 50 employees, but it is, I think, just a general practice that we still follow in allowing individuals to, take leave under the Family Medical Leave Act. And it's been included there.
Basically what it comes down to, rather than compensation, it just comes down to protecting your job.
Yeah.
So yeah, which is completely reasonable, I think.
So then we move down into military leave. This is something that is existing in our code and still fairly standard. Leave of absence. Military leave of absence will be granted to employees who are absent from work because of the service in the U.S. Uniformed Services in accordance with the Uniform Service Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. And just really, if they're leaving for service, their position remains open and they're able to return and be placed in a position that they would have attained had they remained continuously employed, or a comparable one depending on the length of military service and according to the USERRA. So if you have any questions on that.
Any questions? Okay.
Then we get down to the bereavement leave, and so that's really something to think about, especially if sick leave is able to work for bereavement leave. As you said, using bereavement leave first, it can be something that we can put in here, or if there's the need for both. Because this bereavement leave is for 5 days and the sick leave is 5 days. I'll make sure I go back through the formatting. So ultimately, that's 10 days a year that potentially an employee could have for the loss of a family member. I don't know if that's too excessive. I don't know if council has any thoughts on that. I don't think this is like going to be a usual circumstance, but that is the potential way that it would be set up if it's left the way it is now.
Comments, questions, thoughts?
You're saying you could extend their bereavement using sick leave?
Mike,
Are you saying you would extend their sick leave or their bereavement leave in place and use sick leave, correct?
per our just most recent conversation, and yes, if you see that it says under bereavement for the definition of immediate family,
Looking
refer.
back here.
Yeah, so with sick leave would follow the same definition of immediate family. So potentially if somebody lost a family member, they could use bereavement leave and then follow up with sick leave for an immediate family member.
Okay.
Okay, if we don't have anything else on that, then time off to vote was existing and includes regular full-time and part-time employees. City encourages employees to fulfill their civic responsibilities by participating in elections. Generally, employees are able to find time to vote either before or after their regular work schedule. If employees are unable to vote in an election during their non-working hours, the city will grant up to 1/2 an hour of paid time off to vote. So we do allow our employees to come down on their break or during their day and exercise that right. It's also helpful as a side note that our absentee office is in the office, so plenty of opportunity. Jury duty, again, existing, includes full-time and part-time. City encourages employees to fulfill their civic responsibilities by serving jury duty. Employees have completed, who have completed a minimum 90 calendar days of service and an eligible classification may request paid jury duty leave. Jury duty pay will be calculated on the employee's base rate times the number of hours the employee would otherwise have worked during their absence. Regular full-time and regular part-time employees will qualify for paid jury duty leave again after 90 days of employment. So people are not penalized for serving on jury duty.
Did you say jury duty is new or?
No, this is existing.
That's been in there, okay.
And then witness duty is applicable law procedure, and it was under, we did have it in a similar format under 2.52050 court leave. Employees who are asked to serve as a witness for the city will continue to receive their regular pay during their service. If an employee is subpoenaed to testify in any other kind of litigation, the employee may choose to take vacation time or leave without pay. So they'll continue to receive regular pay as a witness for the city, but otherwise, if it's another different case, they would use vacation time or leave without pay. And the employee should notify their supervisor of a subpoena to allow the city to adjust its operating requirements as needed. And then here's a really new one. It was in there, so I left it in there. I've had some feedback from employees about, well, 2 hours doesn't really add up to much in a year. Maybe it's insequential enough that it doesn't need to be in here. We do have a lot of employees who just volunteer outside of the work, and in their off time, we have talked about the employees that serve for emergency services during their work hours are not penalized for leaving the office and going and serving on an emergency scene. But this goes further into the city recognizes the importance of building positive relationships through volunteer community service. because of that, we, all regular full-time employees may volunteer and take up to a maximum of 2 hours of normal paid work time within every 12-month period to participate in improved community service activity. The time and activity must be approved by city administrator. And again, if that one stays in, I'll change that to city manager. So 2 hours, and then examples of eligible community service organizations and activities include school and after-school programs, community development, community programming, community events, SVFD and EMS or Barbara Heights. And again, this is really new and I don't know. I'd love to hear council's feedback if that's even.
I know the obvious one for me is on the fire and the EMS. If we have responders, I mean, I don't want anybody worried about getting paid to if they're going out to save somebody's life. So, I mean, I think we need to have some additional language or in there that, you know, at the approval of the city manager or whatever. I mean, there go or change, you know, up to a maximum of, you know, some number, you know, per year that makes sense. And then anything over that would just be approved,
Okay.
you know, by the manager or something. So something along those lines. But yeah, sure. I mean, I would agree. 2 hours isn't much. So thoughts, comments from you guys?
So make it specific to first responders.
I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, even 2 hours for volunteer time. I don't know how often that gets used or not, but
Yeah,
it
it's
would,
almost like, because I hate to say like, you don't need it, because I think like, it's a good thing to have, but it does kind of say like, my dad just did his volunteer time from his work they were paid, and I feel like our community just kind of does it anyways, and I almost feel like that 2 hours in the office doing the work for the city is more valuable than thinking I'm gonna do an additional 2, or somebody who maybe, you know, I don't know, like that's just kind of, I was trying to think of how to say it where I'm not saying I don't want you guys to get paid to volunteer for 2 hours because it's helpful and you do it anyways, but but it,
So, yeah, so is there gonna be a cap on it per year?
yeah.
Is there gonna be a cap on it per year? I got no issue with the EMS
Yeah.
or the fire. It's the others that I don't want to spend 40 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right
Fair
now, I mean,
enough.
the other stuff, it's written in as 2 hours. I mean,
Yeah.
either,
So the others would remain 2 hours.
We could change it. I mean, we could change it and make
Well,
it
that's what I'm trying to
more,
figure out what everybody's thinking.
more first responders specific. Is that what I'm hearing? So it's more to first responders on the clock who are responding to an incident and make that volunteer time specific to that. I do think that's an important service that we provide.
yeah, and it wasn't my intent to carve that out. It was just to make sure that there's an exemption for those people that are on fire and EMS. They should be given a lot more leeway for, you know, bugging out at work if there's an emergency and they're first responders. Yeah, Meg, go ahead.
Yeah, if I just wanted to add to the fire and EMS, sorry, excuse me. Yep. The fire and EMS volunteers, I think there should just be a little bit of a separate category for their time. So it just doesn't, it gets separated just a little bit.
Okay. Then any thoughts on the other stuff? Ashley, I heard your comment. And then, so right now for the other volunteering, we have 2 hours in there. I mean, was there any feedback from staff that gave you any direction or?
Really that it wasn't super valuable or pertinent, due to the limited time that it is. So I think
I was-
Ashley might be on
I was gonna say, because if we can, you know, as we're looking at all of these
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
that's, I think, kind of where I was trying to be like, I don't want to be like, no, don't volunteer, get paid for that time, but is there something else
Yeah.
that we can offer that's better? Because
Yeah.
I don't feel like it doesn't really make a difference for the community, the 2 hours times however many, you know, in the grand scheme, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any issues with that. And then, so maybe we do make it more specific then to the EMS and fire.
Perfect. Okay. There isn't anything else on that. We go down into employment termination, and this just is, standards for separation. This is fairly significant and new due to the fact that we, this policy will update our status as an employer to at will. Previously or currently we are a just cause employer. The employment termination is what we would follow through the process, for at will employees. It talks about separation may occur at the option of the employee or the city. That's the at will component. Common types of separation are described below. Employment with the city is based on mutual consent, and both the employee and the city have the option to end employment at will, with or without cause at any time in compliance with applicable law. So that's very specified in this policy and throughout the policy. Talks about resignation, volunteer employee termination initiated by employee. 3 days without reporting to work as a voluntary employment termination. But we can waive that for good cause shown. An employee who resigns or quits while in good standing and later seeks to withdraw the resignation will be allowed to reapply for their position if and when posted. Involuntary employment termination initiated by the city's dismissal, layoff, and involuntary employment termination by the city for financial or workload reasons. All reasons for termination. And then, standard, they need to return their keys, disclose current passwords, promptly cooperate in removing personal belongings. They're responsible for returning city property. And that's for termination. And then below that, we go down to resignation. Resignation being a voluntary act initiated by the employee to terminate employment with the city. Although advance notice is not required, the city of Seldovia appreciates the courtesy of 2 weeks written notice. And the administrator may schedule an exit interview. Okay. With that termination, there is a clause in there for pay in lieu of notice when the city initiates the release of a regular full-time employee. And in the absence of budgetary emergency and major misconduct, the city has the option of providing wages in lieu of notice up to 2 weeks pay at the rate and hours that the employee would normally have been scheduled. So nice way to say, hey, this isn't working for reasons listed above, but you can have 2 weeks pay of notice.
So are the words major misconduct, is that defined? Or are those just words? I'm wondering.
Leave that is defined.
You might want to change that to, because you've already got, let's see, the reason for separation must not be prejudicial to the city as determined by the city in its sole discretion. Let's see, in the absence of budgetary emergency and major misconduct. You may just want to get rid of the word major and have it misconduct. And then, I mean, it kind of goes on into the, as long as it's, determined by the city and its sole discretion, as long as that's clean.
And Heidi, who makes that decision if the city terminates somebody and we decide to give them that 2 weeks?
That would be the city manager.
Okay. Should that be in there just so there's not a question?
Yeah, it just needs to be clear that it can't really be an arguable point, right? It needs to be, it's either at the city's sole discretion, and it's clear. Yeah, it can't be arbitrary. So.
Yeah. I think what it's trying to state is that if it's a major misconduct, then we wouldn't provide the wages.
Correct.
Yeah.
But without major misconduct being defined, you kind of leave yourself open to it being arbitrary and.
Yeah, you might as well provide it.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay, employee conduct and rules. Here's where we get into just a lot of information about how employees should conduct themselves in the workplace. This is a new section of the policy that was not previously included. We did have a drug and alcohol use policy, but nothing direct. I mean, there was a small, I take that back. There's like a very small snippet in code that I didn't write in here about, that we have to act ethically is pretty much what it's like a 3-sentence employees must act ethically in code. But here provides just a little bit more of a guideline. It lists a non-exclusive list of prohibited misconduct as, theft or inappropriate removal. I won't read them all out, but falsification of timekeeping, working under influence of alcohol and illegal drugs, fighting or threatening violence. And you can see the list down here. I can give you guys a minute to read through them. But boisterous or disruptive activity, negligence or improper conduct. I'm just gonna-
Yeah, it's all pretty straightforward.
Anything in? Nothing in there about firearms? Is there? I didn't see it.
It's not real supposed to,
Okay. We're good.
And there was a more in-depth section of a different code that talked about firearms. So if there's something more in depth that you want pulled in, we can look into that.
Any additional thoughts, comments on this section for anyone? Good. Okay.
And then again, it talks about being at will. And then we go down to safe workplace. Prioritization of safe workplace. We do have a safety program through the Seldovia Volunteer Fire Department and EMS safety officer who provides us regular trainings through AMLJIA, our insurance. She's able to access them through that program and then provide them back to employees. And that's that injury prevention program is an additional layer that we utilize, and our harbor master actually helps implement that. So that's a binder of safety information. Visitors in the workplace. This just talks about only authorized visitors allowed in the workplace. This rule promotes safety, avoids theft, loss, and damage. People shouldn't be in there if they're not not in the public main area, but coming into our offices and outside of business hours without authorization from employees, and that all visitors should be entering the city's main entrance. Smoking, interestingly enough, was not in there before. I've had employees say, I thought we had this. And I was like, oh, not that I've seen in code, but this is all smoking, vaping, e-cigarettes, and other forms of smoking are prohibited throughout the workplace. This policy applies equally to all employees, customers, and visitors. So nobody should be smoking or vaping in the city office or any city building. Presentation and workplace etiquette, another new section, and this one give me pause a little bit at first, but I think just as well as our conduct and work rules, it's a great guideline for how we should present ourselves. and what that workplace etiquette is. I mean, I think it even goes down to, and maybe I took that out. There was something about the copier, like return the copier to use. Oh, let me look if it's in here still. But, avoid gossip, public accusations or criticisms of other employees, report broken and non-working equipment, avoid discussions of your personal life, issues when you can easily be overheard, or your words are hard to ignore, try to minimize unscheduled interruptions, highly fragrant lotion, perfume, cologne, fragrances, and scents should be avoided in the workplace. We do have a few employees, including myself, who are very sensitive to those things. Maintaining proper dress, responsibly use and maintain city property. I don't need to read them all, if you want to look them over, but just a fairly standard list of items to adhere to make hopefully the workplace life better for everybody.
Yeah, and I think these are one of those things that can be kind of, people can look at it and go, well, of course, but I think this is really important to have so that if there is something where usually it's going to be this heightened, if you need to do a write-up for something, you have something to reference of why you're bringing that issue and that attention up to document, an issue with an employee. So I think this is good.
Okay. We don't have anything else for this one. We do get into use of city equipment. We do have a laptop or mobile device policy. But I like that this one goes further into city's equipment, buildings, and vehicles being costly to repair. Employees are required to reimburse the city for any charges resulting from their personal use of the telephone. So no long distance phone calls. No employee may use city's postage for personal correspondence. I mean, again, like Council Member Keithley said, this are things that probably most people know, but it's nice that it's there in language that it's not for personal purposes. City equipment vehicles may not be borrowed or loaned for personal purposes without the express written authorization of the city manager or their designee. Just making sure that we're looking out for the best interest of city's equipment because of that cost to repair or replace. So employees are expected to exercise reasonable care, perform required maintenance, and follow all operating instructions, safety standards, and guidelines, and to notify the supervisor if there's anything that appears to be damaged, defective, or in need of maintenance or repair. As well as that it can, the improper, careless, negligent, destructive, or unsafe use or operation of equipment or vehicles will result in disciplinary action up to and including at-will dismissal. Take care of it if you're using it.
Yep, seems pretty straightforward.
Effective communication. This is another one that gave me pause at first. It's definitely new, but I think that, even to include to ensure effective telephone responses, employees are expected to use the city approved or customary greeting. And I was like, oh, well, what is that? And it's like, well, we do say city of Seldovia, hello, city of Seldovia, or city of Seldovia, how may I help you? It's just, that's about as customary as we get, but it's nice that everybody, that is an expectation that we have, that people, when they answer the phone, give a greeting to let them know that they reached the right place. If the caller becomes abusive, exit the caller, place the person on hold, and notify a manager or supervisor. Absolutely, that's one that we don't want people coming in the door and yelling at our employees. Don't want them on the phone yelling at employees. They have every right to just exit the call or take a step back and get somebody else involved, but still remaining positive, helpful, and professional throughout the interaction as much as possible. And you guys are easy tonight. Computer and email use, again, does kind of go back to the mobile device, laptop policy, but does get more into, employees may not expect privacy in the use of their city equipment. We had that before. I mean, we really kind of had this already before, but just explains it again in one form with everything else. That employees should not use a password or access a file or retrieve any stored communication without authorization. Passwords created by an employee should be given to the city manager to ensure access and energy or during an absence. I don't expect that for every day to day, but there are circumstances where that is useful. We're not permitted to download or copy or purchase software without authorization. Computer and email may be monitored, searched, or examined at any time. It's not yours, it belongs to the city. Then it goes on to talk about use of computers or communications in any way that is inappropriate, such as discriminatory, harassing, offensive, disruptive, or distracting is prohibited. Transmission of sexually explicit images, messages, cartoons, ethnic slurs, racial comments, off-color jokes, and other communications that can be construed as harassing, discriminatory, or showing disrespect for others is prohibited. So a lot of you should not do this, or you may not do this. And of course, and it doesn't state in there maybe, but it should, but certainly those are all actions that may result or will result, I should say, in disciplinary action up to and could include dismissal. So I'll add that in just because I think that's helpful.
It's probably also captured just like back in the beginning here,
Yeah,
in the catch-all.
yeah. Okay. Sorry, just making a note here. Again, internet use. Any incidental personal use must be occasional within reasonable limits and occur during breaks or lunch. We don't prohibit employees being able to go onto their Facebook account or make a doctor's appointment or set up an appointment for their house, to use a Google search during their break. But of course, with that occasional and within reasonable limits. And then again, going into the other prohibited acts and not accessing any site or content that you would not be willing to show your supervisor. I think that's a great one, and one that I've certainly talked to with employees as they're hired on about social media. Anything that we put out there as employees, potentially, if it's representing the city, it's public record. So if you don't, I heard a really great comment one time starting as city clerk that's always stuck with me is if you wouldn't want to not be headline news, then don't put it out there in writing. So again, if you don't want people to know what you're looking at, don't do it. And then there is a list of prohibited activities during an employee's incidental personal use for a break. So you can use it for minor things, but not this list. So no threatening or harassing messages or discriminatory messages, not for resources or equipment for any form of personal gain, stealing or using or disclosing someone else's information, copying, pirating. Go down, it's a long list here. Engaging in any illegal activities, don't do it. Any questions on that one?
Nope.
Okay. I do like that it says sending or posting messages or material that could damage the city's image or reputation. So, back to that social media. Sexual and other unlawful harassment. Again, I think this is a fairly standard policy that did come out. They all came from through a legal team through our insurance office. And so this was one that was put in there or suggested, and we took it from their suggestions. So just defining what sexual harassment is, a partial list of sexual harassment examples. And if you experience it, report it immediately. all allegations will be investigated. And they do not limit the city's ability to release employees for any reason, even if there's an investigation, so. Okay. Workplace violence. So fighting, verbal threats or insults and expressions of hostility, physical horseplay, and similar risky conduct are prohibited. Conducts that threaten, intimidate, or coerce another employee, a customer, or a member of the public at any time will not be tolerated. This prohibition includes acts of harassment and discrimination. Reported immediately. This includes threats by employees as well as threats by family, customers, vendors, solicitors, or other members of the public. So it goes both ways. One reporting provides specific details. We will promptly investigate reports of violence. The identity of the individual making a report will be protected to the extent feasible. And the city may suspend one or more employees with or without pay pending investigation. During the investigation. And again, this comes back to at will. We can also let them go during that time as well. Drug and alcohol-free workplace was already in code existing, so still following that the city enforces a drug-free and alcohol-free workplace. While on city premises or while conducting business-related activities off city premises, no employee may use, possess, distribute, sell, or be under the influence of alcohol or illegal drugs. And it does say illegal drugs includes marijuana. And that if an employee performs work for a government contract or a grant, they must promptly notify the city of their criminal and conviction of drug-related activity occurring in the workplace if that occurs. So fairly standard. Do you guys want a moment to look at that one or? Okay.
Yep, good.
And again, violations of this policy may lead to disciplinary action up to and including immediate termination of employment. Substance use, this one is not something that we actively participate in, but that we could to require blood or urine or breath testing from an employee to go with the first one. And with that commitment to provide safe, healthy, and productive work environment. Again, it's a city may require blood, urine, or breath testing for an employee. And it has those specific instances when when a public safety employee is promoted, demoted, or transferred to the extent permitted by law. That's not currently, we don't have we do have our volunteer department, but and our safety officer, but currently our public safety is outsourced outside the city, but it's still in here in case this comes up again in the future or after an accident in which the employee is involved or upon reasonable suspicion of substance use. I want to just specify a public safety position is in any position in the police or fire department having a substantially significant degree of responsibility for the safety of the public, where the unsafe performance of the incumbent could result in death or injury to self or others. So maybe not be completely applicable at this moment, but left in there in the event of future that it does become applicable. Okay, and then if we keep moving through investigation, here's when we, well, I guess we got a few still to go, but I don't know, it's the last three that talks more about the grievance process and that beginning with, and this doesn't directly relate back to that, but it can correlate with that the city does reserve the right to perform searches without prior notice of city furnishings, closets, storage areas, desks, lockers, and similar areas in order to investigate or monitor criminal conduct or potential misconduct under the city's policies. Facilities and storage are provided for the convenience of employees and remain city property subject to search. So just as email, just as city equipment.
Computer?
Yep.
Doesn't say computer on
It does previously when it talks about personal equipment, not personal equipment, but city equipment.
it. Okay.
We have that right to monitor even as they're using it. Solicitation. We did add in language that we wanted it more specific to may not solicit or distribute literature and handouts in the workplace, because we're like, well, we do like to pass books. But this is more in not passing personal books, but in the actual solicitation of wanting, something from somebody. So however, employees may not solicit or distribute literature concerning these activities during work time. So interests in events or organizations, no fundraisers during working time, but lunch periods, work breaks, other periods in which employees are not on duty. I don't know that this is a problem or will become a problem, but it's nice that it's in here. If in the event this became excessive and we had people always coming in asking other employees for solicitations, but at this point where it's kind of a non-issue. So, and then we come into the last two, and that does come down to the discipline section of the policy. So discipline, it does specify again that the employment at the city of Seldovia is at will. The management tools available to the city include the option of providing feedback and administering discipline in a progressive manner when employee misconduct is repeated or employee fails to meet performance standards. So while we're at will, we still have the leniency and ability to work with employees as needed. And then list similar to some of the others about a reason why an employee may be disciplined, but that's not limited to this list. So a lot of those things that we just talked about, use of alcohol, excessive abstinences, theft, falsifying information, harassment or sexual harassment, negligence, improper conduct, failure to meet reasonable work standards. So, and then going down there, discipline for misconduct may include verbal warning, written warning, suspension from work without pay, dismissal, or request for resignation. And more language about being at will because employment is based on mutual satisfaction. Employees are expected to cooperate positively to meet standards, follow directives, and conform their performance to requirements. Progressive discipline will not be utilized if the employee lacks necessary skills, attitude, or training, or when lack of satisfactory performance is the issue rather than misconduct. Discipline is most likely to succeed when both employee and manager are communicating effectively. Certain types of misconduct or non-performance will support suspension or dismissal without prior warning or second chances. These include fraud or misrepresentation of any kind, workplace violence, fighting, verbal attacks or threats, and job abandonment. Decisions about discipline are made by the city manager with the option of appeal to the mayor and city council. Okay. If we don't have feedback on that one, we'll go to this I lied, two more. This is the procedure. And it talks about the steps when the disciplinary or performance-based action is dismissal. The supervisor and or city manager will provide a brief statement of grounds and effective date to give to the employee, stating that the employee will have an opportunity to discuss the grounds. The employee may request the meeting, or the supervisor or city manager may initiate an appointment by setting the date, time, location. The employee will have the opportunity to ask questions. Failure to attend the scheduled meeting or to request a meeting waives the employee's opportunity for discussion. The employee may not utilize the following dispute grievance resolution unless they meet with the supervisor or city manager first. The meeting to discuss grounds for dismissal may be consolidated with first step of the dispute grievance resolution, provided the employee identifies the employee's grounds for for objection to dismissal in the meeting. And then here's our examples of grievable issues. Grievances may only be initiated by employee concerned and may not be pursued without the affected employee's consent. The city encourages the resolution of disputes and concerns at the earliest stage possible. Issues and concerns should be presented first, then supervisor. If the employee supervisor is a party of the dispute or concern, an employee must submit a concern or dispute through their city manager, mayor, or another manager. So you look at those grievable issues. They get a written reprimand or suspension of 3 or more working days. Dismissal of a regular employee. Improper application or violation of employee handbook. So those are things that they can appeal for dismissal on. Examples of non-grievable: city policy or ordinance, an incident or issue that was reviewed via another resolution process, employee performance evaluations, at will release during introductory period, and employment status. The steps go in and are heavily city manager related for recommendation of the legal office. And it looks like my numbers are messed up there, so I'll fix the numbers. With the final process being that they can appeal to the city council. The appeal must be submitted within 15 days of receiving the step 2 response. The city manager and or city attorney shall prepare the response of the appeal and submit it within 15 days, calendar days. And then as the city council, the grievance appeal will be handled in accordance with the Open Meetings Act as a confidential matter. So that's when it would go into executive session, as long as they don't request it to be open. That's their right, as it specifies here. The city council will receive and review the appeal with up to 30 calendar days to provide its response. The response may be to invite the person into the present to an in-person presentation. And relevant managers, so to have everybody come in to hold an informal hearing in case of dismissal, to provide a full post-hearing process, to appoint a third-party review process, to recommend mediation, and or to decide the matter based on the materials presented. So right then and there, when it's presented, if it's so apparent or there's such a decision, you guys can make that justification during that first initial presentation. And the city council is authorized to convene executive session to receive legal and financial advice on its options for responding to the appeal and to adjust or adopt any resolution it deems appropriate to respond to the dispute, unless the employee is otherwise notified in writing. If the city council does not respond in writing within the 30-day deadline, the appeal is deemed to have been denied. So if you don't respond, they don't have any further action. And that's what it specifies in that bottom paragraph of the page, that you're the final, city council is the final administrative action of the city. An appeal to the state court may be available in general. Court appeal of the city's actions is due within 30 calendar days of the employee's receipt of the decision. However, there may be exceptions. Any grievance shall be considered resolved at the completion of any of the steps if all parties are satisfied. Once a grievance has been investigated and denied, repeat filling of grievances on the same thing will not be permitted. And if it involves a group or if a number of employees file separate grievances on the same matter, the grievances may be handled as a single grievance. You can handle it as one, or I can handle it as one. And then you can handle this one. Anything on that? Okay, well, that takes us to the end of the personnel policy. I did include, just for everybody's reference, our current city personnel system. If there's a consensus from council, we can make the changes discussed and bring it back at a future meeting. And then it would be adopted. Well, there's a 2-step process. first would be an ordinance introduction to repeal the city personnel system and have it refer back to the personnel policy. And then secondly, so that would be a two meeting reading, right? An introduction and then public hearing. And then at the public hearing meeting, there would also be a resolution that would implement the personnel policy. Unless you guys want me to make these changes and bring them back to another work session to just fully go through everything discussed. I can bring it up in a future meeting.
Is there anything here that needs to go back? Any itemized changes that need to go back in front of legal, or
I'll send the whole
Would-
document to them once.
okay,
final.
just one final?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you have it like it in a Word doc or something with track changes or something? So,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's hefty.
Oh, yeah,
Their red line document,
I-
they've sent both a red line document and then a separate clean document because it's
Long.
it's a lot, but
Okay.
we can make it through.
Any other thoughts, comments from council on what you guys would like to see? Just bring it back for introduction or another work session or? I don't think I need another work session.
As long as it passes the attorney, I think we're good. Let's move
Agreed.
forward.
And I went back and watched the work session that I missed before we came today, so there wasn't anything that I'll need to bring up in addition.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. I wasn't 100% sure if we needed to move on this. I feel like typically what would happen is you guys would make your amendments, and if there was something that we needed to discuss just for public purposes, we would discuss that item, but it seems up and up to me, and I would agree that so long as legal likes it, you like it. Good job. We trust you.
Yeah, and I think we've gone through this now too. And if anyone's got any issues or if there's anything left, as we finish up the process, if there's something that pops out or something, we can certainly address it prior to final adoption. But yeah, no, I think we just go through it, bring it back when it's ready, when it's been vetted by legal, and we'll get it introduced and then we'll get it on the calendar.
Perfect. I did also make one note for myself that we have comp flex time listed in our current existing personnel policy, and that's for our finance officer and our city clerk for meetings and things that they attend. If instead of taking overtime, they have the option to use comp time later on in the week or year. So I'll make sure I just wanted to make sure to update the personnel policy to be able to continue that through. And that was,
No, that's fine.
Can I ask a question for
Yeah.
clarification? So pending you're getting it back from legal, when this comes back, is it going to come back as an informational item, or is this something that we're going to continue to go through by item?
it would come back as a resolution.
Okay.
And so you could at that point in time choose to go over any of the information you want to go over, but I imagine as a staff report, it would be a minimal update that we've had a couple of work sessions, it's gone through
Mhm.
legal process a few times. Here's the final document.
Sure, that's what I was wondering. It just seems like it just seems redundant to.
Yeah. And then if there's changes in the future, those can only be made through your guys' approval. So in the future, anything that comes up would come back as a resolution, and probably not the whole document, I would hope, but if there's pieces that
Bits and pieces, yeah.
need changed.
Yeah.
And that's a great way for you guys to review and for us to review and just keep it up to date and accessible.
Yeah.
Versus. the
Well,
current code.
typically, I mean, as the city manager being the personnel officer too, I mean, you're gonna be the first one to know if something weird comes up that
Mhm,
is either not addressed or doesn't seem consistent with the intent, right?
mhm.
So, and then that would be a good time to bring it back before council and let us know what's going on.
Yeah,
So after it's been implemented and in use for a while.
yeah. And to further discuss the process, because you were walking in late, so I don't know if you heard Councilman Payton. I just say it's a twofold process. There will have to be an ordinance introduction and
Yeah.
public hearing to
Right.
initiate having that ordinance reference back to the policy itself and then a resolution adopting the
Sure.
policy.
Those steps make sense. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
bureaucracy takes time, but I don't know if it needs to take every time. You're great. You're wonderful. I just reviewing my understanding of how our system works, and I was just making sure I'm right. Just making sure I know what I'm doing.
Okay, where does that leave us here? Anything else on this or?
Well, I think you guys answered the bereavement leave question, the volunteer time question. I don't know if you guys want to go back over or have any thoughts or considerations for that 40 hours of leave that's able to be cashed out by employees. We will implement a donation based on a accrual rate. We'll look into that. So I think that was really one of the last two questions is cash out of leave up to 40 hours. And if we want to have it in writing included here that the city opening time is the city hours are 10 to 3, but office hours are the 7.5 or 8 hour day. And then actually that's not what I was referencing back to city closures. I was referencing that we do have as a budgetary item under city closures that employees get a 4-hour call out for responding to an emergency during a city closures. And then it'll be, if it's longer than 4 hours, then it's hourly based on that, and it can go into overtime depending.
Yeah.
So if you think like a tsunami call or earthquake or some wildfire, something where we're on duty consistently for days, those hours would track and we would work through that process. But if it's just like a short event, for a couple hours, they would get a minimum of 4 hours for that call out.
I do have one comment, Mayor Campbell.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the leave donations in the past. You know, in my experience, those were just donated hour for hour. There was never any difference in, compensation. So if the employee was, at a higher salary rate than the other, it was hour for hour. You know what I mean? And it was settled on the city side of the books, but generally those leave donations were donated when they had exhausted all of their leave due to some type of health incident or, somebody in the immediate family members got cancer or something, that's when them were typically used. And not only that, the employees were notified that they had an opportunity to make a donation. I don't know what your thought is on that, but that's generally how that worked. But it was just hour for hour trade. Made up to a certain number of hours, a max, there was a cap on it per employee.
I think because we don't have very many employees, we probably don't need to worry about a max, but in a large
Right.
space, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't have any objections to any of that, so.
The other thing that comes to my mind, I know Heidi, you and I discussed it.
Mhm.
I thought we did. On the employee file.
Mhm.
If the employees they were always able to review their file once a year. I don't know if, we have anything in there for that. And also if they had some type of discipline letter, the letter was clear for a year, they could request that it be purged from the file after a year. And what that prevents in my book down the road is, maybe you have a conflict between a supervisor and an employee. They don't just necessarily get along the best, it's just, they don't like each other. So now that the employee's got a new supervisor, maybe things get better and that history is purged and things get cleaned up.
Maybe that should be dependent, like situationally dependent. We have like what you're describing is a perfect situation to kind of like clean slate.
Yeah.
But there are like sexual misconduct or like hate crime or things like that,
Those type of things, they would normally be dismissed over that.
normal.
Yeah.
Yes, it is included that they can review their file at any time, but I can include a disciplinary letter purging clause. That's,
You know, that the employee could get beyond it.
Yeah, you just, again, it needs to be one of those things that's not super arbitrary, right? I mean, it's got to be pretty well defined, or it could become, expected that everything that was negative be purged
Yeah.
after 1 year or something.
Because a year is not a long time, and you could have a repetition of things, and I guess where I stand is needing that history. If something happens, and something might happen that's not big, but if there's been too many of the little things, then, I mean, we can, it's at will, we can let them go no matter what, but I think it's always in our best interest to have something to show there if there has been a history.
Yeah, and that's a classic HR 101 right there, right? If you can't prove a pattern, then you might have an issue. So if something like that ever came to a court case or something, so.
Discriminatory.
You could set that time period or not. That's why I wanted to mention it, is to see what everybody else thought.
and it could be something we could come back and reevaluate later. Don't include it now, and then if it's something that seems like it'd be beneficial, come back to.
Yeah, I mean,
How often are you guys writing up? I mean, I don't know, what your internal dialogues are, but, I'm just imagining that you're not writing people up every time there's a discussion. I'm imagining that if there's a write-up, it's for a considerable issue. So although I do think that what John is describing is a good point, and, probably to the benefit of employees in a bigger place where you have a lot more control, like things occurring. But I don't know that in our little hamlet, we're writing each other up every time there's a squabble. My point right now is that I agree with what Ashley's saying. If it's occurring that you're writing somebody up, I'm imagining it's for something that needs to be documented for the long term. I would hope, I don't think that it's occurred where people are having difficulties with their manager, and that's causing them to lose their job or causing them to have a negative work experience. So that's not necessarily something that needs to come and go in an employee file, but if it's something where you as an employer and as a city entity needs to document employee action, I don't know that we need to be expunging our records. I don't know.
yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think I get what you're saying, John. I mean, certainly it's the intent. The intent's good, but I mean, I think we almost might want to just leave that one alone and just leave it as a more traditional, HR type reporting system. And if there was something crazy that came up, you could, again, like anything, this is like any other, part of the code, it's always open to change. So.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other final thoughts before we wrap this one up? Any questions, thoughts from you guys online? Pretty quiet. All right. All right. Well, I think we've, gone through this one in pretty good detail. You've got some cleanups to do. We'll run it back through the final vetting through legal and then bring it back through our two-step process. And then, try to get it wrapped up here in the next couple months and get it into code.
Perfect, thank you. And in general, you guys are happy with the direction this is going? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's good. I mean, it's just like any other section of our code, right? It's got to all get gone through sooner or later and cleaned up and made relevant. So I don't think there's any section of our code that we just can't, or we can continue to ignore. So times change, people change. So the way we do business changes sometimes. So got to stay relevant. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, comments, we'll go ahead and adjourn the work session, and then we'll be back online here in about 35 minutes for the regular 6 p.m. council meeting. Okay. Thanks. We're
Thank you.
adjourned.